Today I want to talk about everybody's favourite subject, law. Like a lot of what St. Thomas writes, when he writes about law, he starts with God. But again, I hope it will surprise you that the place he starts is with the way in which God rules over the whole of creation. God has a plan for every creature, and he governs everything by his providence. Thomas calls this the eternal law. God directs the activity of the whole of creation as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and his rule over creation is a kind of law. We humans can know that law, at least in part, by studying the world around us and thinking about it. We can see at least a little of the marvelous ways in which God provides for his creatures, the extraordinary diversity and splendor of the natural world as things move and act in the ways that God has given them. In the other animals, this is mostly instinctive. Animals keep the eternal law of God just by being themselves and living out their animal lives. What about the human case? Well, of course, God has a plan for us too. There is a part of the eternal law which provides for us. But because we are capable of choosing for ourselves, God involves us in his plan in a more intimate way. Humans can choose to fulfill the eternal law or act to buck it. We can act in ways that will make us happy and fulfilled, or we can go our own way. God gives us the dignity of choosing whether to play our part in the eternal law. Well, actually, even when we act against it, God's plan works out anyway, because St. Thomas thinks that even sin is part of the divine plan, but as forgiven. The best way for us to live, though, the one that will really make us happy, is to be willing to play our part in the eternal law. St. Thomas calls the human part of eternal law natural law. So the natural law is a kind of law written in human nature which governs the ways in which humans live. It's important to see that this is something we can know by thinking about ourselves. God tells us in his 10 Commandments not to murder, but he didn't need to tell us that. St. Thomas thinks that if we had just thought about it, we would see that murder never leads to anything good, that it is one of those things that is just contrary to human nature. And there is some evidence of this from anthropology, the study of human culture. Anthropologists now talk about certain constants which are the same in every culture. Every culture has prohibitions against murder, against theft, in short, against many of the things in the 10 Commandments. St. Thomas thinks it's still a good thing God gave us the 10 Commandments and the other moral commandments we find in the Bible, though. Even if we could have worked many of them out for ourselves, if we had thought hard and honestly about ourselves, still humans are very good at self-deception. We too easily persuade ourselves that the thing we want to do is the right thing to do. So God gave us the help of the moral law in the Bible. St. Thomas calls this divine law. The divine law in the Old Testament is to be found in the written commandments. Christians are no longer required to keep the ritual commandments of the Old Testament, like the command to avoid pork and some other foods that we find in the Old Testament, because those commands are for Jews. And the early Christians came to realize that non-Jewish converts didn't need to keep the Jewish ritual laws. You can see this in the letters of St. Paul and in the Acts of the Apostles. But the moral law of the Old Testament, the 10 Commandments, but also the other commandments about care for the widow and the orphan and the stranger and so on, are still to be kept by Christians. The new law, St. Thomas thinks, is explicitly taught by Jesus in what we call the New Testament, but actually primarily it's a law of faith written on our hearts. So we Christians keep the new law by living out our life of faith. And of course that will involve keeping the old law and the commandments of the new law, but that law is not something outside us. It has been written on our hearts by the Holy Spirit. So much for law. Tomorrow I want to, I hope, surprise you again by telling you how St. Thomas thinks law is not enough.